All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the 8th session of Google Guru's Admin Training Week. We started off today with another great session on leveraging Google Plus and Hangouts along with Uber Conference. It's been a great start to the third and final day of Admin Training Week, and we've got another great presentation here for you this afternoon with David Huff, the CTO of Cloud Sherpas. I'm going to introduce him in just a minute. But he's got a great presentation for us on Chromebook management. So before I go ahead and introduce David, I'm going to do a quick introduction for the presentation, and then we'll get started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get going. And first of all, I'd like to apologize for the slight delay. We had a couple of technical difficulties that we were trying to work out, but everything is good to go. So I'd like to also introduce myself. My name is Andrew McGonigal. I manage the Google Guru website, and you are watching Admin Training Week Summer 2014. So if you're not familiar with Google Guru, and this is your first session for the week, Google Guru is a free training resource for everything you need to know about Gmail and Google Apps. So whether you're a Google Apps admin or an end user, there's something on the website for you. So we currently have more than 300 videos on our website that are authored by industry experts like Cloud Sherpas. Cloud Sherpas has more than 10 videos on our site, and if you're interested in contributing to Google Guru, you can go to googleguru.com/contribute. We also have a daily newsletter that we send out where we share the very latest tips and tricks about Google Apps, as well as the latest Google Apps news. So this is a great resource for admins as well as end users. So if you're interested in that and maybe distributing that to your company, you can go to googleguru.com/register. And like I said, if this is your first presentation of the week and you've somehow missed the rest of the presentations, Admin Training Week is the largest virtual gathering of Google Apps admins, and we've been sharing the best practices for managing Google Apps domains and users, and today we're going to talk about devices. So we've been fortunate to have a bunch of industry experts helping out during Admin Training Week, and we have one more presentation after this, and I would definitely recommend checking that out. It's at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in watching that session, you can go to admintrainingweek.com to learn more. We also have some free giveaways that I know everyone is really excited about. So to go ahead and claim those free giveaways, I'd like for you all to go ahead and go to googleguru.com/session8 and take a moment to fill out this short form. You can claim your Admin Training Week t-shirt and your free Admin Training ebook that we'll send out after Admin Training Week is over. And you'll also be eligible to win the Nexus 7 that we're going to draw for at the end of this presentation. So there's a lot of great stuff there. If you filled out a form before, you can go ahead and just visit that URL, and the field should be pre-populated. So all you need to do is go ahead and hit submit. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce David and let him go ahead and get started with his presentation. So David, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely, thanks, and welcome everyone to our session today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see the presentation. If it's working properly, you should see a slide, Admin Training Week, Chromebook Management.
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, so today we want to spend a little bit of time talking about Chromebook management, and we're going to cover it kind of soup to nuts. So some of these topics may be a little more detailed, and where possible we'll try and dive into them where appropriate. But if you've got any questions, we'll also use the Q&A feature of the Hangout, so feel free to enter those as we go. And we've got some time reserved at the end to dive into those in a little more significant way. Just a real quick notice, as Andrew mentioned, my name's David Hoff. I'm CTO here at Cloud Sherpas. And to give you a little perspective, Cloud Sherpas is headquartered here in Atlanta, We've got around 750 employees scattered across, I believe, 14 offices in North America, Asia Pac, and Europe. Roughly 5,000 customers. We also focus, in addition to Google, on Salesforce and ServiceNow, all software as a service products that kind of lead their industry segments. And we've been regularly recognized as one of the Google Enterprise Partners of the Year. So just a super quick snapshot of who Cloud Sherpas is. As we get into the content, I want to start out with a little bit of a background around the different variations that you might hear when people start talking about Chrome. So we'll spend some time on Chrome, Chromium, and Chrome OS. We're also going to go through all the different kind of policies that might affect each one of those products and talk about how they commingle themselves into the user experience. Finally, we'll jump into a little bit of information around kiosk mode and guest sessions. These are two capabilities that are provided via policy management that we see lots of organizations taking advantage of. And then the last thing, we'll touch on Cloud Print. We're not going to get too terribly deep into it, but it is an important consideration as you're thinking about deploying Chromebooks within your organization. So we'll touch on that before moving into the live Q&A. So getting started, when we look at Chrome, a lot of us, our initial experience of Chrome is based on the Chrome browser itself. And we want to back up just a little bit. The Chrome browser is actually a derivative of an open source project called Chromium. And this is something that you can go out on the web, you can download all the source code for it directly. The design goals behind the Chromium open source project are listed on the screen, but it's basically meant to be a very lightweight, a very fast shell for accessing the web. So it's got a very minimal user interface. It doesn't get in the way of what you're doing. And the project sponsors say that it should be light and fast both cognitively and physically. So you'll probably notice this as you use Google Chrome. Google Chrome itself, again, is based on Chromium, and it pulls the majority of its source code from Chromium. But what Chrome, the browser that a lot of us are using today, adds are some of the proprietary features that cannot directly be open sourced. So Google has established a relationship with Adobe because they recognize Flash Player is somewhat ubiquitous on the web, and that is not something that can be open sourced. So Google bundles in addition to Flash Player, a PDF viewer. Both of these are things that do require a proprietary license. So if you were to go download Chromium, you'd be missing these things. But they are available as part of the Chrome download that most people have installed. The two other core features that you'll notice is there's a print preview system. That's related to Cloud Print. We'll touch on that a little further. And then the auto update mechanism that allows the continuous push of new releases into the channel that you have installed. All those are proprietary things that Google has added on to the Chromium open source project. The core of what we're going to be talking about here today is Chrome OS. And it really doesn't matter if you're using a Chromebook or a Chromebox or I guess even one of the newer Chrome bases, right? They're all running the same version of the operating system, and really you can think of it as a combination of the Chrome browser and a Linux operating system that has been kind of skinnied down so that it just provides the essential things that you would need. It is fundamentally different from the traditional approaches that most of us in IT have used over the years in terms of how the kernel, how the operating system itself is managed. So it is digitally signed by Google on their servers and pushed down to the devices. And this provides a great deal of resistance from common malware and other security problems that you would run into with Windows. because the first thing it does when it boots is it checks to see, is it digitally signed by Google? Has it been tampered with in any way? And if so, it's going to fail over to the last known good version or display a message that the operating system is corrupt. And what that means is users cannot install software on a Chromebook. We'll talk a little bit about extensions and browser apps, but again, they are not fundamentally installing anything that interacts with the kernel directly. The other element of Chrome OS is that it is based on an encrypted file system, so it's inherently suitable for multi-user environments where you can guarantee that one user is unable to see the contents of another user's session. So again, just a little background so that you understand that Chrome OS is a derivative of Chrome running on an underlying Linux kernel. So as we jump into policies, I want to make a distinction between two types of policies. There's going to be what are called Chrome policies, and these are a core feature of that Chromium open source project that we looked at earlier. They also work with what most of us call Chrome or Chrome for Business. The deployment of these Chrome policies is managed by a systems management tool, and this is really applicable if you're running Chrome on Windows, on Mac OS X, or on Linux. So it's not something that touches the Chrome OS that we're going to look at. These are a separate set of things that are typically pushed out via Active Directory and some kind of systems management server that will push an MSI or push a configuration policy to a device. We're not going to touch on those in detail, but I have included a link if you'd like to go see all of these policies. What we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on what Google calls cloud policies. And in contrast to Chrome policies where you have to go out and edit Windows Active Directory configuration files directly, work with MSIs, cloud policies are out of the box with Google Apps. So you just log into the admin control panel and you'll see the ability to manage Chrome. And it's a very, very point-and-click environment. There's no scripting, there's no packaging needed, and it provides the capability to control both your users and their devices. And you may be wondering the photo of the carrot, how is that related to what we're talking about? I do want to give a little bit of a cautionary note that Google's approach to policy management is much more of the carrot end of a carrot and stick model. So they're giving you lots of things to make the lives of your users more convenient. But the policies that we're going to talk about today are not necessarily meant to be a rigid stick that you can use to subdue your users' behavior. So as you look at these things, remember that if a user all of a sudden starts using a different machine beyond the Chrome device, all bets are off, right? There's some user policies that will still apply if they happen to sign in to the Chrome browser, but it is very easy for a user to go just fire up, another browser like IE or Firefox, and they've effectively negated the cloud policies that we're talking about here. So keep that in mind as you're planning out your policy strategy, that you do kind of have to balance the security restrictions that you're putting in place with the knowledge that they can be circumvented if someone's going off and using a different platform and a different browser. So hopefully that makes sense, but we'll provide you some very nice features to be able to deliver to your users.
Hey, David, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
So the Chrome policies link that you mentioned in the last slide, I just wanted to if you want to go ahead and show that first of all. So it looks like it's chromium.org /administrator/policies. Is that correct?
policy-list-3 is the actual URL.
Okay. Well, for everyone, if you can't, or if you have trouble remembering that, or you can't access it, that link will be included as part of the Admin Training Week ebook, and I'll go ahead and post that in the event page as well. So you guys will be able to access that link, no problem. So sorry to interrupt, Dave. If you want to go ahead and
yeah, no worries. And you can see it's a fairly comprehensive. I'm not going to go through it, but it's going to go through each one of the policies in detail and provide not only what the policy does, but what the possible configuration values should be. So it's a good source of reference, and you can also find it on the Chromium homepage. So if you just go to chromium.org, you'll see that this is the documentation for administrators.
Great, thanks, David.
Okay. So we want to talk a little bit more about the basics around cloud policy. And again, this is the policies that are going to affect your users and your devices. They are created via the Google Apps admin console. So if you go to admin.google.com, within your Google Apps domain, you'll see a Chrome device link in that admin control panel. And I'll step through a live demo here in a few minutes so that you can see exactly where to navigate. But in general, each of these policies that we're creating, you might have the capability in some places to specify a value in a user policy and a value in a device policy. And each policy can only have one setting in place at any given time. And the order of precedence, once we think about org units, always starts at the most specific org unit and rolls up. And then from a device versus user perspective, the device policy will take preference over the user policy. In some situations, you might be using the other policies that we mentioned earlier. So for example, you've created a set of policies that are Chrome policies pushed down to the Windows machines in your domain. You might have that same user using a Chromebook, and they can still have the effect of that Chrome policy. And that experience where they're going to be using both a Windows machine and a Chrome OS machine, the OS policy will take preference when they're using that device. So just keep in mind that you can have kind of that multi-dimensional interaction when a user happens to participate with Chrome using different platforms. So in this graphic kind of illustrates, the first thing in that hierarchy is going to be the device or the machine policy. That's what we would consider the highest on the food chain in terms of a setting. It could come from either Chrome OS or from a traditional Chrome for Business forced installation. Beyond that, we have the user policy and preferences, and the user experience is a combination of these. And just remember, where we have that situation of a conflict in a setting, something that can be configured at both the machine and the user level, the machine or the device setting will take precedence. So a couple things about cloud policies. You might notice that you don't necessarily have to have a Chromebook in order to go ahead and start using these policies. So if you were to log into the admin console and go to the Chrome settings right now, you can create policies that are pushed to your users. They are just user policies, but there's nothing additional that you need to purchase in order to do that. So from a user's perspective, these policies are applied when they log in to the Chrome browser. And it's a bit of a fine point of distinction here. But for those of you that haven't looked very closely, there are two ways that you could potentially access your Google Apps account. The first one is if you were to go into the Chrome browser and just type in mail.google.com or something like that. Once you attempt to access that URL, it's going to prompt you for your username and password, and you will be logging into Google Apps at that point. The second way that you could potentially access Google Apps is you could log into the browser directly. So you'll notice that in the upper right corner, I'm going to jump out of full screen mode, and you'll see the little three stripes. I think some people call it the hamburger menu. You'll see it on the right-hand side of your Chrome screen, and you'll notice how I am signed in as David Hoff. So I'm actually signed into the browser, and this provides me the capability to synchronize a lot of my user session settings. So things like my extensions up here in the upper right, things like my saved passwords, things like my bookmarks will all follow me to any additional machines where I happen to sign in to Chrome. And again, this is fundamentally different than just signing into Google Apps. I'm actually signing into the browser. So hopefully that makes sense, and if we have more questions during the Q&A, we'll jump into those. And again, the easiest way to verify you're signed in is to click on that little hamburger menu, and you'll see your menu indicate signed in as user X or Y. Cloud policies are a lot like many of the other services available within Google Apps, meaning that you can specify policies at an organizational unit level. So you're going to have your root level policy that applies to everyone. And then if you need to have unique situations for specific groups of users, you can assign those at an org unit level further down in your organization, so that people in marketing may have certain extensions, people in sales might have a different set of extensions or restrictions. All these are available, again, without having to purchase anything beyond what you've got now. And we'll include these links as well in the ebook. I'm just going to pop open, just for reference, to show you the policies. Again, these are the user policies that you as an administrator can push down to your users. And it's a fairly extensive list. Some of the most common things that a user policy will do is push down a set of named extensions. And in our demo, I'll show you exactly that. You can also do things like modifying the home page, disabling the password manager, turning on a screen lock, preventing someone's ability to go incognito, turning on safe browsing. We can also put a few things in place in regards to the home button, the home page, if you need to push out a corporate home page, something like that. We can do some things related to security, so blocking specific cookies, allowing session-only cookies so that when someone signs out of the browser, all their cookies are removed. Plugins. It's a pretty exhaustive list. And again, the link will be out there for you to go through and look at, and we'll jump into a few of these during the demo. Again, keep in mind that these user policies will affect not only your Chrome OS users, but also your users signed into the Chrome browser. So the next portion of policies are device policies. And device policies are applied when a user signs into a Chrome OS device, so a Chromebox or a Chromebook or a Chromebase. When they sign into those devices, the device policy will be pulled down. Now, in order for that to happen, that device has to be enrolled in your domain, and you have to have purchased a device management SKU. Depending on if you're in an EDU domain or in a Google Apps domain, there's a slight variance in pricing. but you need to work with a Google Apps reseller to purchase the device management SKU for Chrome. And once you've done that, you'll see a new section in your admin console that allows you to manage your devices. And one of the questions that we get about device policies is in regards to how the device was originally purchased. So it doesn't matter where you purchase your Chrome devices from. You know, if you contract them through CDW or if you purchase them from Amazon.com, it doesn't really matter. You can apply the management SKU to any Chrome OS based device. The one thing that is a bit of a caveat for that is that the first time that a Chrome OS device is used is when it must be enrolled. So if you bought a machine from Amazon and took it out of the box and logged in with your credentials, you're going to need to wipe the device before you can get it enrolled in the domain. And as part of this, it's usually a good thing to remember. We don't want to use kind of the end user reset called Power Wash that's available on a Chrome device if the device is going to be enrolled in a management console. So I've included a link here that talks a little bit about the differences between resetting a device and power washing a device. And you'll see up here in red just some of the warnings that you're basically going to be resetting the device to its factory out-of-box state. And then a little further down, you get the notice that talks about using a managed device, how you want to actually wipe it. And the wiping process varies by device. Typically, it's going to involve either a keystroke or a movement of a switch. There's a kind of an embedded switch on a lot of the devices. You'll move that switch, you'll let it go do its thing to switch it into developer mode, and then you'll move the switch back, and that effectively resets everything on the device to its factory state. Again, if you do a power wash, you are not resetting the enrollment on that device, and you are detaching that machine from its current license. So a lot of times we'll get customers that have attempted to power wash an enrolled device, and they start to have issues with policies. You typically need to open a support case with Google and get your license re-provisioned if you've power washed it. Google gives you a little bit of fudge room in your management licenses. There's usually a few extras for these accidental situations where they've been power washed. So you might notice that you're able to re-enroll successfully once you've completely wiped it and reset it. But if you have trouble, open a support case with Google or with your reseller, and they'll help you get that license reactivated. Some of the most common use cases that we see, specifically for device policies, involve pushing Wi-Fi configurations. So if you're using a certificate-based Wi-Fi configuration where you have to enter a username and password, and let's say you've got that in an educational space where you need to roll out 5,000 machines or 10,000 machines to a school, you definitely don't want to have to touch each machine in order to get all of that Wi-Fi configuration done on each device. What you can do is create that in the device policy, and you can push it down to the machine. Now, a little bit of a caveat to that process. Obviously, if the Wi-Fi configuration is in the policy, the first time that machine connects to the network, it is going to need an open network in order to get connected. But it's a relatively easy process for you to get that open network so that the device can get the first connection established, when you enroll it, and pull down that Wi-Fi configuration to connect up later. The second most common use case that we see for device policies is really around what we would call kiosk mode or guest sessions. And you can kind of think of this as, as a traditional kiosk like you might have at the airport, or even in some place like a library. Guest mode is going to allow you to configure a few things like the ability to automatically force a logout, or the ability to limit the amount of time that a user can be in a particular session. So if you want to make sure that no one uses the machine for more than an hour, you can put that in part of the device policy, and after an hour it'll automatically log the user out, and you can say get rid of all that user's personal information. So when they're forcefully logged out, it'll delete all their cookies, and you don't have to worry about the next user coming in and looking at the browser history or the credentials of the person that might have been using the machine prior to themselves. So, cloud policies, when we start thinking about best practices for deploying these policies within your domain, you will see that there's an ability to disable auto updates via policy. We tend to recommend that you leave the auto update enabled, because there's a very regular cadence of improvements to both the policy tool and the Chrome OS itself. Auto update will provide you with the latest security releases. So definitely as a best practice, try and make sure that auto update is enabled. And also plan a phased approach to test and deploy Chrome. Because this is a product that is undergoing regular improvements, Google has kind of segmented it into what they call 3 different release channels. So in the old days, we might refer to this as different version numbers of the product, but these are continuous streams of feature releases, and channels is actually a much more fitting nomenclature. Chrome devices have really 3 different channels. When you open up a Chrome device out of the box, it's going to be on what we would call the stable channel. And what that means is roughly every 6 weeks, there's going to be a background process that checks with Google, and over the course of that 6 weeks, there should typically be a new version of the operating system that gets installed kind of under the covers, and you'll see over by the system clock down in the lower right corner, over the course of that 6 weeks, you'll see a little up arrow that pops up. If you haven't rebooted the machine, the next time you do, it'll apply that new update. And again, that's called the stable channel. And that's what you want most of the users in your domain configured to use. The next step up in the channel chain is the beta channel. And the beta channel is updated every 2 to 3 weeks. It is something that has gone through unit testing, but is not traditionally documented with a lot of support tech articles. So it's usually a stable release, and we tend to recommend that the IT department or a subset of your users are on the on the beta release, so that they can get access to the new features usually 2 to 4 weeks before they hit the mainstream. And that way, if there's something unique about one of the features that changes your user experience, your beta users will know, A, that they're on this early release channel, and B, you'll have a little bit of a runway to plan for how that should be approached when it hits the stable channel. The third of these 3 channels is called the dev channel. And the dev channel is something that is typically considered unstable. So if you upgrade to the dev channel, you will experience frequent situations where the operating system will crash or do things unexpectedly. There's typically several new features available, and it's really meant for developers that are actively involved in the Chrome OS development. So in general, there really isn't a meaningful reason for most people to use the development channel, but it is out there. If you happen to be on a Chromebook now, you can go to the settings help screen, and there's a radio button that allows you to manually move between these channels. As part of your device policy, you can specify, at that org unit level, what release you want your users to be on. And one kind of tip, if you are on one of these beta or dev channels, the Chrome OS doesn't have, what we might think of as a traditional, INI file to go change something or a series of checkboxes. What we do in order to test some of these new features is to use a special URL. Instead of www, it's just Chrome://flags. And this is where you turn on and test some of these new features. Okay, so a bit of a policy demo, so you've got some real-world experience around what we're talking about. I am going to log in to the Google Apps admin console. And we'll see what most of you should see when you are accessing your console. If we scroll down, we'll see over on the right-hand side, I've got my device management link within my control panel. And in our case, we have the mobile devices, the MDM policies. We actually have a few Chromebooks for meetings, so you might not see that in your control panel, but here's the one that we're going to focus for policy reasons. We're going to go into Chrome, and now you see the different types of settings that we can push out. So the first thing we'll look at are user settings, and let's assume that our task today is to push out a series of 3 or 4 extensions to all the users in our domain. So we started at the root of our org unit tree, and you can see we've got a handful of other org units. But if we scroll down, these are all the policy settings that are available to us, and I would recommend, if you're using policies, to check back with relative frequency at these settings, because there have been many that have been added over time, and if there's something that's not available today, check back every few weeks and you may see a few things pop in that suit some of the needs you have within your environment. But in this particular case, I'm going to go out and I'm going to use this setting called pre-installed apps and extensions, and over here on the right hand side I've got manage pre-installed apps, and what it's going to show me in this particular case, right now we have 4 different extensions. We have the Chrome Remote Desktop, we have Google Drive, we have Google Calendar, and Gmail. And these are 4 pretty useful extensions. On a Chromebook, an extension is typically going to show directly in the Chrome menu. So this makes it pretty easy and straightforward for your users. If you had a specific app that you wanted to include as part of your user experience, if you click on the Chrome Web Store, and let's say I liked something like Snagit, these are the different entries in the Chrome Web Store that have that name. I could click Add, and it would forcefully push this extension to all of my users that are within this org unit. You can see there's a few other things if we want to control the pinned apps. So pinned apps are a little bit different from extensions. These are the items that appear in the Chrome launcher. And you can think of the Chrome launcher as the equivalent of a start button for a Chromebook. Further down, we've got some more settings if we want to turn on within our domain the ability for our organization to have its own Cloud Sherpa's collection of extensions. We may even have some private extensions that we want to publish in that app store. Most of the additional settings, you guys can go through this and figure out what makes the most sense for your organization. But these are going to control the user experience. Things like browser history, if you want to turn that off. Things like safe browsing, geolocation. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but go through, find out what makes sense for your organization, and remember that, you know, if I put only allow certain URL patterns, it is only going to apply in this case to the devices that they're signed into, the Chrome OS devices that they're signed into. But it does provide an effective situation where, you know, you might have them on Chromebooks in a place where they should only access certain URLs. It gives you a basic type of web filtering. So these are the settings. Remember when you're done to, I haven't made any changes to this particular screen, but remember when you're done to hit OK so that they are saved. And once they've been saved, you'll want to test them. So in order to test the results, I'm still in the Chrome browser, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter another special Chrome URLs. I'm going to type in Chrome : /policy, and this is going to display the policy in effect. In this particular case, I'm on a Windows machine, and the only thing that's applied to me is a user policy. But I can see all of the policies and some of the details around when it was last refreshed. So in this case, my fetch interval is scheduled to check for a new policy every 3 hours, and it got this policy 28 minutes ago. Now, if I had made a change to the policy when we were just in the admin console, I can come up here and I can press this button to reload policies, and you see that now the last fetched goes to 0. So I just pulled the new policy. And as you're going through and making sure that the policies are applying the way that you want them to, you'll see in this particular situation I have a user policy, and the name of it is extension install force list. If you remember, that was the 4 browser extensions that I am forcefully inserting into my browser sessions. And in this case, I can click on Show Value. And it's a little cryptic as you're looking at each of the configuration values that the policy is pushing. But a little tip, as you go down and see, these are just CRX files. These are the actual links to the browser extensions. And if you double-click them, because they're kind of a unique string of letters, if I go out and I search for that particular string of letters, I can see that, that policy is pushing the Gmail extension, right? If I go down and look at another one, there's the Google Drive one. There's the Chrome Remote Desktop one. So these are all the things that we saw over in our admin console. Scroll all the way back up here in our pre-installed apps list. Okay, so our policy is doing what it's supposed to, and this gives you the capability to come in and verify that it's being applied okay. Now, if I were on a managed Chromebook, over here to the right of the user policies would be another box that says machine policies, and this list would become much longer with any of the additional configuration values that I was pushing down to the machine. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into policies and how they work. As we wrap up, I just want to spend a minute or two talking about Google Cloud Print, and then we'll jump into the Q&A session. So the reason that this is an important topic, if you're looking at Chrome OS, you'll quickly notice that Chrome OS does not have a print subsystem that would allow you to just plug into a traditional USB printer. In order to print from a Chrome OS device, you have to use a technology called Google Cloud Print. And what's nice about Cloud Print is it removes the need for the machine to be on the same network segment as the printer. And while that may not seem hugely valuable, if you think about a situation where you might be connected up to a Wi-Fi network, and the printer, especially if it's a guest network, is back on a private network, may not allow direct access between the Chromebook and the printer itself. So the basic architecture is your device will generate the equivalent of something like a PDF file. It'll hand that off to a Google server, and then you will also have a Cloud Print connected printer that will be polling Google on a regular basis to say, hey, are there any print jobs waiting for me? So both the Chromebook and the printer are using Google as the proxy to get the print job from the machine to the printer. So a couple of things about Cloud Print. It does allow printing from devices that don't traditionally support it. And what I mean here is if you think of your tablet or your smartphone, it does work on those devices as well. So if you want to print a document or an email from your Android device or from your iOS device, you can directly use Cloud Print to print to one of these existing printers. There are drivers as well for Windows and basically anything that runs Chrome that will allow you to enroll those machines as part of Cloud Print as well. I found that it works really well if you're doing any kind of VDI, any kind of remote desktop. We use the Amazon Workspaces product to give access to a remote Windows session, but again, that Windows session is sitting, probably somewhere in Virginia. I need to be able to print from, let's say PowerPoint on that machine directly to a printer here in my office, and the Cloud Printer driver allows me to do that. It does coexist with your existing printer infrastructure, so you can install a runtime service on your existing print server that will connect it to Google Cloud Print and share out those printers with the users in your domain. So feel free to go out and look for the Cloud Print MSI that will allow you to install it as a Windows service. So again, a very, very quick run through of Cloud Print, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me dhoff@cloudsherpas.com, and at this point I will jump over to the Hangout and see what we've got available for a Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, David. I'm going to go ahead and run through these. I've pinned some of the questions from the Q&A app if you want to take a look. I think there's a lot of great questions here. And one that you just touched on, you mentioned a little bit in a talking about Cloud Print. Somebody was asking if you recommend using Chromebooks for VDI if users are trying to access Windows apps like with Citrix, and I think WebEx was another example. Do you recommend doing that at all?
It's not really a case of recommending. It's one of those things that sometimes you're forced into needing access. WebEx is probably the most common one. Microsoft Office is the other. If you're required those two use cases, then a VDI solution is the probably easiest route. Amazon offers a product called Workspaces, but it does not directly support Chromebooks. So you need to use the Chrome Remote Desktop extension in order to access an Amazon Workspace desktop image. There are other solutions if you have a Citrix infrastructure. Citrix will run natively in a Chromebook so that you can get to a remote desktop. But I found in general the Chrome Remote Desktop extension is probably one of the better tools. It's kind of user-based, so the user has to go set it up, on a Mac or on a Windows machine the very first time. But once that's in place, it allows them to remotely control and feel like they're sitting at the desktop of a Windows machine.
Yeah, that was actually another question that we were going to get to that you just touched on. Somebody was asking if there's a remote desktop option for Chromebooks outside of Hangouts. So yeah, the remote desktop Chrome extension is a great option if you're trying to get to your Mac or Windows machine.
Yeah, and it depends what you're doing. There's a few browser extensions that allow you to do native RDP connections, the Microsoft Remote Desktop. From a Windows machine, you can find those out in the Chrome Web Store. I think there was a question about, other than Hangouts, Uber Conference allows you to do screen sharing. The issue there becomes, remote control. So GoToMeeting now has support for Chromebooks in a couple of different ways, but again, the issue there typically is remote control. If it's a help desk scenario, the Chrome Remote Desktop is still the best for that.
Mm-hmm. I think our top question here is the situation from a Google Apps for education environment with a computer lab where there's shared Chromebooks, and I guess if classes are changing and some users are forgetting to log out of their sessions, how can the teacher force logging out of Chrome once a browser is closed? You touched on, I think, an option a little bit is the kiosk mode. I'm not sure if there's another option for a forced log out of a group of Chromebooks.
So if we're in guest session, we can configure a setting that when they close the browser, it will exit them. In most education environments, they're typically configured one of two ways. One, for the younger kids, like under third grade, guest sessions makes a lot of sense. When you click close on the browser, it will forcefully you have the ability to forcefully sign them out via policy. For the older students, they typically have their own account. And what we recommend in that case is that you enforce password at power on. And what that will do is, at the end of class, you can have a policy that everyone just has to close the lid on their machine. And that effectively logs them at least back to the password state. Many schools have shared machines where someone's coming in, and what you can do in that situation is remove the shared login screen, so that whenever someone gets the machine, they're only going to see username and password. They're not going to see the people that might have other profiles on the machine.
Awesome. Good points there. Let's see. I guess if we're getting down to specifics with Chromebooks, there's a question here about someone who's interested in deploying Chromebooks on a large scale. Do you have any recommendations as far as Chromebook models as for a large scale deployment of what's the best combination of price and performance? I know there's constantly new models coming out of different types of Chromebooks, so it's probably depending on when you're planning on deploying. But David, if there's any specific models that you think are a good recommendation?
Yeah, in general, I'll pass along a couple things. The first one is, a reason that we always want to standardize on machines was, in the Windows days, we had to create images, and images were dependent on drivers, and that's just how mass deployments were handled. With Chromebooks, that's been completely removed from our need from an IT perspective. So it's not uncommon to see mixed model deployments, and I don't think it creates the kind of work that a mixed traditional desktop might create. That being said, if you're in an educational environment, you want a durable machine, and in my experience, the Lenovo's have been very, very durable. I would say they're probably at the far extreme. They are a little more costly. Versus some of the lower end like Samsung devices or Acer devices that are good from a value perspective, but if you're committing to a 3 to 5 year deprecation policy in the hands of a school child, a model specifically built for the EDU, like the Lenovo or a few of the other models, I think Dell's is positioned that way as well. Definitely worth the extra money. In general, you're probably not going to do too much maintenance on them. Some places will replace screens and keyboards, and they're traditional PCs in that respect. It's not a hugely difficult thing to do when year 2, year 3 come around. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the Lenovo. The one thing I would say is, if you're in a business environment, I would caution people from getting too much of an investment in Chromebooks that use the ARM processors. They're definitely significantly slower. And if you're doing a lot of video conferencing, you also want to think about getting a model that has 4 gigs of RAM, so that when you go to a Hangout and bounce back and forth between a spreadsheet and a document, it's not constantly reloading or dropping you from the Hangout. So look for the 4 gig models, and also if you're in a business environment, think about the Intel machines rather than any of the ones that would have the ARM processors.
Great. Let's see. We've got a couple more questions here. You had talked about power washing and wiping as an administrator a little bit earlier in the presentation. Is there precautions that an administrator can take to prevent users from either intentionally or unintentionally power washing or wiping the device?
I believe with release 35, there is now a setting to prevent the user from being able to power wash the machine. I know that as part of release 35, you can automatically force re-enrollment, so that even if a user does attempt to power wash a machine, when it reboots, the very first screen that comes up will not be the login screen; it'll be the enrollment screen. Now that's only the case for devices that have release 35 or higher, which I forget, I think it's been a month or two that's been out on the stable channel. But definitely, look through the documentation, because that is something that has come out relatively recently, and I think we'll continue to see improve.
All right, last one here, and this may be a device issue, so correct me if that's the case, David. But Jane was asking about people complaining about losing internet connection or being kicked off of the network on Chromebooks. Is that a common issue? And if so, are there any solutions there?
Yeah, so it does happen. The chipsets in Chromebooks and the support is probably not as mature as you might have in a Windows environment or a Mac environment. In general, it should not happen, but if it does, that's where you really get to earn your stripes from a debugging perspective. Just as you saw me going into Chrome:/policy, you can go into Chrome:/about, and that is how you get to all the log files. You'll see a link called System, and basically the About screen is going to show you all the special URLs. The System link under that About screen will let you get a dump of the network stack, and that will help you explain why the device is getting disconnected and reconnected. Sometimes, all of a sudden you have hundreds of machines on a network that weren't properly built for that level of volume. So sometimes it's an access point issue. Sometimes it's a hardware conflict, and a newer version of Chrome OS will address that. So make sure to log it as a case, and that network trace will be one of the things that the support team asks for if you're noticing this problem in a consistent fashion.
All right. I think that's about all the time for questions that we have to get through. So, David, I just want to say thank you for a great presentation today on Chromebook management and answering some great questions. So, yep, thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, so after wrapping up there, we're going to go ahead and just jump back into the presentation real quick and finish up this session, and then we'll draw for the Nexus 7, and then there's just a couple other notes that I'd like to go over. So I'm going to go back into that presentation for just a moment. And so there we have. Thank you again, David. Like I said, another great presentation on Chromebook management. Hopefully everyone learned a lot of great information there. So before we move along to the drawing for the Nexus 7, I'd just like to remind you guys one last time, you can fill out the form at googleguru.com/session8. So you can claim your free t-shirt and the Admin Training Week ebook that will go out after the week is over. There were some notes in there from David's presentation that I know some of you are asking about. So all of that information will be there. Those links that he provided will be clickable, so you'll have access to all of that. And the Nexus 7, obviously, that we're going to draw for in just a moment. So before we do, I would just like to say thank you to our sponsors once again for helping to put together a fantastic week of presentations. So thank you again to Uber Conference, Spanning, and Sightly, Synergize, FlashPanel, Cloud Sherpas, and David Hoff for the presentation today, Backupify, and Virtru. And also thank you to the rest of our sponsors for helping us put this together. We couldn't have done it without them. So thank you, and you can learn more about our sponsors at admintrainingweek.com. And so with that being said, I'd like to announce our winner for the 8th Nexus 7 that we're giving away this week. So the winner for this session is Sean Trantham. So congratulations, Sean, and we'll be in touch with information about how you can receive that Nexus 7. And for everyone else who has not had a chance to win this week, we do have one more session this afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So I would urge all of you to stop by and join that session. The session is Google Apps Roundtable. And like I mentioned earlier during our first session of the day, I'm really excited about this session because we have a lot of great people on here. We'll be joined by four individuals who are responsible for Google Apps in their organizations. So Justin Gale from BRP, who you heard from on Tuesday, Karen Huffman from the National Geographic Society, Kevin McGrail from USAID, and Ronald Jarrell from Virginia Tech. So this is a collection of some of Google's largest enterprise customers, and they've got a lot of unique experiences about managing Google Apps, so we're really excited to hear from them. And then one more note that I'd like to mention, Google I/O is next week, the 25th and the 26th. So we're going to be at I/O next week. Google Guru will. So if you'd like to follow I/O and stay up with all of the latest news there, join our Google Plus community. It's Google I/O '14-live blog. So we'll be posting pictures and articles there with all the latest information about Google I/O. So please stop by there and join the community, and we can share lots of great news there. And lastly, if you have any questions about Admin Training Week or Google Guru, feel free to email me at andrew@guruvideos.com. And David had mentioned before as well, if you have any questions for him, you can email him at dhuff@cloudsherpas.com. So thanks again for all of you who joined us today, and don't forget to stop by our session, the final one of the week at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks again, and we'll see you there.
Thanks.